And today, I have been sued by the First Lady Man of France.
You don't get sued by the entire French government by playing it safe. You don't go to court with a foreign president on accident. Are we describing the underdog story of a lifetime? One woman, Candace Owens, against French President Emmanuel Macron and his wife, First Lady Brigitte. Some have called Candace's theory the most outrageous, unbelievable story ever heard. Others have called it a masterpiece of investigative journalism.
And then it turns out she's right.
Yeah.
Either way, it could be considered the trial of the century, a trial that echoes the passions of one bold woman influencer. Panikin, woke right, anti-Semite, bully. These accusations, and others like them, bombard the comments section beneath nearly every X post from @RealCandaceO. But are they accurate? How did Candace Owens go from reawakened conservative poster child to controversial podcaster mom fighting a legal battle against a foreign sitting president? What twists and turns lead a person to a moment like this? If we humans are largely the result of our combined experiences, then what happened to Candace in her lifetime that would cause her to take the stand she is making today? Candace would tell you in so many words that she was partially raised a camouflage conservative who then, like many others, deviated from that path in college years. It is clear that Candace learned some conservative values under the guidance of her grandfather. Though she doesn't directly attribute her ideology to her grandfather, she regularly dotes on him, and for good reason. Hardworking, all-American, bootstraps kind of character. During Candace's preteen era, she became collateral damage to her parents' divorce, which, in a twist of fate, thrust her into what she would come to recall fondly in her adult years as a positive and pivotal season of her life. Amidst the divorce, she was sent to live with her grandparents, where she would at least be partly shaped by the character and history of her grandpa. Robert Owens grew up in North Carolina on a Jim Crow-era sharecropping farm. Robert knew a tough life under the social strains of that time, but attempted to raise his grandchildren with a healthy fear of God, imparting some valuable lessons into Candace's life. Perhaps one of the most formative events of her life was during high school. A fallout between good friends turned into a nasty lawsuit, nearly ruining the lives of a few teenagers forever. The story goes, Candace had missed a series of phone calls, and upon checking the voicemails, was shocked and disturbed to hear the voice of a friend making death threats and racial slurs directly aimed at her. Not wanting to make a big scene, but also in fear of her life and safety, she reported the incident to school authorities, who took the case very seriously until it was discovered that one of the perpetrators just so happened to be the son of the local mayor. Politics did what politics does, and after a few months of battling in the court to ascertain the true events, the boys involved received a heavy slap on the hand, and Candace received a modest settlement to cover lawyer fees and other related expenses paid for by the school district. Candace has often expressed remorse over the fallout, and it remains a detrimental event in her life to this day. Having to endure such a public injustice as this can leave a permanent imprint. What kind of repercussions did this have on a young, impressionable Candace? Is this the moment she acquired that first layer of thick skin she wears so boldly today?
When I was in high school, I received a slew of messages. Bottom line, it's not fun to be a victim. And I'm adamantly against victimhood.
If her heart still bears a wound, is that wound festering or healing? In college, Candace fell for the liberal agenda, a point in history she never shies away from. In fact, she uses it often as fuel to light up the left. In the pursuit of journalism, Candace quickly came to realize the financial complexities of school was not worth the payout, and eventually she would drop out early. Not one to simply fade into the background, she put her convictions to work and designed a website intended to expose bullies online. The concept was simple and appeared an innocent endeavor. SocialAutopsy.com was a website intended to lift the masks off of online bullies by linking online harassment posts to real identities. At first, the project merely raised eyebrows, but it didn't take long to generate some serious heat and even lead to a deeper conspiracy between Candace and two other, what Candace calls, professional victims. The story is full of twists and turns and extremely odd coincidences. The end result is Candace ruffled the feathers of a prominent anti-harassment group at the time, and her Kickstarter project became indefinitely suspended. Immediately afterwards, her inbox was flooded with more death threats and hate mail that would span the whole spectrum of online abuse, from the most dismissible comments to the most vile things one can conjure. Was their rejection of Candace's work a sign of jealousy from anti-bully competitors? In the Wild West films, they would say, "This town ain't big enough for the two of us." Or was there something deeper happening behind the scenes? Without funding or backing of any sort, Candace was forced to abandon that hill rather than die on it. However, she continued to carry her banner to other hills. Unfortunately, the social autopsy story is too convoluted to come to any reasonable conclusion. As with every story, there are two sides, and this one requires picking. Was Candace bullied out of her platform for standing up for the right to denounce bullies online? Or had she actually crossed a line? Had she created a form of predictive policing, similar to Minority Report, where someone could be punished before proven guilty? Was she setting herself up to be the judge, jury, and executioner? She obviously desired to root out an atrocious and common evil, but did she accidentally open the gates for another? Was this a defensive tendency morphed into a weapon? Either way, Candace had a rude awakening with the shutting down of social autopsy and has claimed that this was the experience that would ultimately change her political viewpoint forever. In her words,
I became a conservative overnight. I realized that liberals were actually the racists, that liberals were actually the trolls.
social autopsy is why I'm conservative. It wasn't long after this when Candace took inventory of her social and political environment. You see, up to this point, she was steeped in the general liberal community and considered herself a part of that club. For example, in an early blog site she ran called Degree 180, she regularly wrote and posted articles that were sometimes neutral and oftentimes very critical of conservatives, Republicans, and specifically then presidential candidate Donald Trump. This was merely an evidence of the likely influence she was under. Although her conservative roots were beginning to grow, she was still heavily influenced by her time as a college student, intern at Vogue, living a New York City and fashion world lifestyle, and so on. Looking back, this period in her life is indicative of a battle between two opposing forces, making the firm decision to transition to a role of conservative influencer. She launched another media outlet called Red Pill Black, where she garnered serious attention from both sides by calling out the inconsistencies and contradictions of the far left. The hard pivot was so intense and laser focused that it raised questions from many on both sides. Was she simply following a pattern of attacking the things that offended her most at that moment? Or was the blooming of a character that had been long since planted only now coming to life in the full sun? Either way, she quickly became the conservative media darling and was swept away by the positive support and enthusiasm from her new conservative base. While once critical of Trump, she turned into an advocate and espoused the common sense rhetoric that had seemed to be innate all along, but only now was expressed in true form, at least until the next change-up.
Candace Owens has a beef, but this time it's with a right-wing darling.
2021, just before Candace goes to work for the Daily Wire, she becomes embroiled in yet another public scandal. During an Instagram live feed, Candace leveled a series of accusations against former Republican congressional candidate Kimberly Klacik.
and yet nothing on the website works, which is totally bizarre. And it looks to me like it was just created late in the day to move some money off of the books. That's my conclusion. My feeling is that some money was laundered. That's a feeling. I cannot confirm that.
She claimed the Congresswoman was guilty of money laundering, tax fraud, illegal drug use, and misusing campaign funds. Not only that, but she took it a step further and said Klacik was a madam who was recruiting strippers for her husband's strip club. Unshockingly, Klacik denied the allegations in a bold move to shut Candace down. Klacik decided to sue her for defamation, seeking a startling $20 million in reparations to her tarnished career. What Klacik did not account for was the laws of the state of Tennessee, where the suit took place. Tennessee just so happens to have one of the strongest free speech related laws in the country. Serendipitously, it is called the anti-SLAPP law, and Tennessee takes it very seriously. A strategic lawsuit against public participation, otherwise known as SLAPP, is described as this in a recent article from the Tennessean. SLAPP suits are a type of costly lawsuit used to silence criticism and prevent people from exercising their First Amendment rights through the threat or application of baseless and expensive legal proceedings. Essentially, an anti-SLAPP law means you can't just sue someone because they accuse you of something, no matter how inaccurate that accusation might be. SLAPP is often used by prominent figures as a sort of bully mechanism, allowing those in power to use money as leverage. Was Candace reeling from the slap of the bully all over again? Or was this a fight she welcomed? Was this a good journalist standing firm in the spirit of free speech? Or was this a continued pattern of controversy lust? SLAPP suits are designed to incur such extreme fees and costs that the average person can't afford to defend themselves, including Candace. But she stood her ground. Under Tennessee's strong anti-SLAPP law, Candace not only won her suit against Klacik, but was awarded over $100,000 to cover the legal fees. But Tennessee is, interestingly enough, not the only state with strong anti-SLAPP laws. In fact, most of the US has these laws and are graded on a percentage basis. Some states have a grade of 0, as in no laws. Then, of course, the max goes to 100, which is described as excellent. One such state just happens to be Delaware. For those who have been paying attention, you already know where I'm going with this. Candace found herself neck deep in yet another legal battle this time. However, she upped the ante and set her sights on a powerful political world leader, the President of France, Emmanuel Macron. Candace wasn't actually the forerunner of this next story, but she certainly picked up the torch to run it all the way to the finish line. Early 2021, a certain interview between a journalist and a self-proclaimed clairvoyant went viral on YouTube, racking up hundreds of thousands of views in a short time. In this video, French independent journalist Natasha Ray made a bold claim that the First Lady of France was actually a man. The story eventually came across the desk of Candace Owens, where she took it so seriously that she ended up publicly stating, "After looking into this, I would stake my entire professional reputation on the fact that Brigitte Macron is in fact a man." The accusation lit the world on fire and has since caused the French president and first lady a significant amount of emotional and political stress. Why would Candace level an accusation as disruptive as this one? Does Candace flippantly play with fate? Or could this be a hill worth dying on? The situation expanded into such a controversy that Macron decided to take Candace to court and sue her for defamation. Once again, Candace jumps into the ring. Is this a spotlight she enjoys? Or could it be that she has been conditioned for this kind of conflict for a reason? Perhaps this is a chicken and egg quandary. Which came first, the affinity for public legal battles or the inevitable life trajectory of one so conditioned to endure this exact type of dispute? Maybe the more important question is, why is she so willing to take such a potentially risky stance on a story this sensational? Does 2025 Candace concretely believe she's going to win this lawsuit? Or does some level of doubt still linger in the equation in her mind? If the risk is known, why take the chance? Could it be as simple as the pattern of success? Up to this point, Candace hasn't lost a battle yet. Does the old proverb, pride goes before destruction, apply here? Or will Candace come out victorious once again? It is important to note that the two women who initially launched this theory against Brigitte were already taken to court in France by the Macrons, where at first, in the lower courts, the Macrons experienced success. However, it was short-lived, and the two women were exonerated and found not guilty of defamation in an appeal that took place in July of 2025. Was this verdict a foreshadowing for Candace? The case against Candace would not land on French ground, but instead would be destined for the Delaware court. And if you recall from the classic suit story, Delaware is one of the strongest anti-SLAPP states in the country and rates at a perfect score of 100. Coincidence? Maybe. But if not, Delaware may have been a strategic move from the start. Did Candace incorporate her businesses in Delaware on purpose so that she could potentially make whatever claims she wanted? It would be too easy to dismiss Candace Owens as a crazed conspiracy theorist, unworthy of public attention, and yet perhaps too unfair to the public to simply let her off the hook and not hold her accountable for her claims. When looking at her life through the only lens we have, a publicly available one with natural limitations, the highlights are revealed organically. From the bullied, scared teenager to the stoic, hardened personality we see today, it begs the question, has Candace become what she loathed in her younger years? Has Candace now in fact become the bully she vowed to protect people from? Or are we asking the wrong questions? The honest truth is that no one knows but Candace herself and God. And maybe she doesn't even know. Is the Candace that we see simply an act, a personality she dons as a mask in order to accomplish whatever means she intends, be it notoriety, money, excitement, or truth? Or maybe the Candace that we see is really just Candace, and what you see is what you get. Time will tell. Thanks for watching. Whether you believe Candace is a righteous figure standing for justice or not, her story can actually be a warning to us all. Be careful in your passion, lest you become the very thing you hate. It's easy to see that this world is a sinful place, and sadly, sometimes we find ourselves wrapped up in the very evils that we condemn. It's true that in a lot of ways, our decisions today are defined by patterns from our past. What started as innocence is left broken, marred by shame and regret. But what if I told you there was a way to break off the negative patterns and be free again? And I'm not trying to sell a self-help book here. I'm actually talking about a spiritual truth that changed my life. I have some good news today. I believe there is a way to become something more than what our past dictates. And the answer is not so hard to find. It's found in a simple story. The Bible tells us that the one who did not know sin became sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. This is the story of a holy God who created a people that he loved with a perfect love. Yet those people wandered away from him and in some cases ran away. But because he still loved them so much, God came to the earth as a man, lived a perfect life, and then allowed people to kill him unjustly by hanging him on a cross. When Jesus did this, he was taking the punishment for sin, our sin, upon himself. And he was making a way for us to know God again. As he hung on that cross, he became sin so that we could become new, so that we could be forgiven and become something more, friends with God, people that will spend eternity with him. I believe this is more than just a story. I believe it's true, and it has changed my life in every way. And it can do the very same thing for you today, if you choose to believe it. My friend, we shot this whole video to be able to say this to you. Jesus is right there, and he's reaching out to you. I hope you enjoyed this content, and I'll see you next time.